Keir Starmer just got politically obliterated, and the man who did it wasn't some seasoned Westminster warrior. It wasn't a rival MP with decades of parliamentary experience. No, the person who just turned the Labour leader into a laughingstock was Jeremy Clarkson. Yes, that Jeremy Clarkson. The same bloke who got sacked for throwing a punch over cold sandwiches. The man who reviews tractors with more enthusiasm than Starmer shows for actual policy. And what he just did to the Prime Minister wasn't just embarrassing, it was career-ending levels of brutal. Starmer thought he could brush off the farmer protests, smile politely and wait for everyone to forget. But Clarkson had other plans. He walked into that farmers' rally, opened his mouth and absolutely demolished every shred of credibility Starmer had left. And the best part, he made it look effortless. While Starmer was stammering through press conferences like a man who'd forgotten his own script, Clarkson was out there speaking plain English, cracking jokes, and somehow becoming the voice of reason in this absolute circus of British politics. If you thought Starmer had any fight left in him, think again. Clarkson just exposed him for exactly what he is, a man so terrified of taking a stand that he'd rather sit on the fence until it collapses under the weight of his own indecision. This wasn't just a political disagreement, this was a public execution, and Starmer never saw it coming. Let's set the scene properly, shall we? Britain's farmers, the people who actually keep this country fed, decided they'd had enough. Thousands of them rolled up to Westminster with their tractors, their signs and their righteous anger. And what were they angry about? Inheritance tax. Rachel Reeves and her brilliant economic brain decided that family farms, the ones that have been passed down through generations, the ones that actually produce the food we eat, should be hit with a tax so brutal it would force families to sell up just to pay the bill. Genius move, really. Nothing says we support British farming like making it financially impossible to stay in business. And where was Keir Starmer during all this? Standing at a podium, reading from his notes like a nervous student who didn't prepare for the presentation, insisting that actually most farms won't be affected. The threshold is £3 million, he said. The vast majority will be fine, he said, except the farmers standing right outside his window were holding signs that said otherwise. They weren't protesting for fun. These aren't people who take time off work lightly. Farming isn't a 9-to-5 job where you can just pop out for a cheeky protest during lunch. These people were desperate. And Starmer's response, well, let's engage in dialogue. Let's restate the figures. Let's calmly explain why you're all wrong about your own livelihoods. It was the political equivalent of telling someone their house isn't actually on fire while they're standing in the flames. And then, like a hero no one asked for, but everyone needed, Jeremy Clarkson showed up. Not in some polished politician outfit, not with a team of advisors whispering talking points in his ear. Just Clarkson in his usual leather jacket, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but knowing he had to be there. And when the cameras found him, when the reporters shoved microphones in his face, he didn't dodge. He didn't deflect. He just told the truth. He said he was there to support the farmers. Simple as that. No spin, no carefully crafted sound bites designed to offend absolutely no one. Just a man saying what everyone else was thinking. The government messed up. They rushed this policy through without thinking, and now ordinary people are paying the price. Clarkson didn't need a script, he didn't need a PR team, he just needed common sense, which apparently is in critically short supply at Westminster these days. And the contrast was devastating. On one side, you had Starmer, the man who treats every question like a legal cross-examination, carefully weighing every word to make sure he doesn't accidentally commit to an opinion. On the other side, you had Clarkson just saying what needed to be said without worrying about how it would play in focus groups. But here's where it gets truly beautiful. The BBC, bless them, decided they'd try to catch Clarkson out. They brought up that old interview where he joked about buying his farm to avoid inheritance tax. Gotcha moment, right? Except Clarkson didn't flinch. He threw it right back at them, called out the BBC for acting like the government's mouthpiece, asked why they were more interested in digging up old quotes than actually listening to what the farmers were saying. It was glorious, because that's the thing about Clarkson. He doesn't pretend to be something he's not. He's not trying to win votes. He's not trying to build a political career. He can just say what he thinks without worrying about the consequences. And that honesty, that refusal to play the game, made Starmer look even worse by comparison. Because while Clarkson was out there defending farmers with passion and clarity, Starmer was still stuck in political consultant mode, trying to find the least offensive way to tell people their concerns don't matter. The optics couldn't have been worse. You had real people with real problems standing in the cold, begging their government to listen. And the government's response was to send out Starmer with his spreadsheets and his £3 million thresholds, talking about vast majorities like that would somehow comfort the families about to lose everything. Clarkson didn't just disagree with Starmer's policy, he dismantled the entire illusion that Starmer knew what he was doing. He pointed out that if Rachel Reeves wanted to target tax dodgers and billionaires, she could have used precision. She could have gone after the James Dysons of the world, the investment bankers, the people actually using farms as tax shelters, but she didn't. She used a blunderbuss. And she hit everyone. The small family farms, the ones barely scraping by, the ones that don't have accountants and offshore accounts. Those are the people getting destroyed by this policy. And Clarkson said it plainly. This was rushed. This wasn't thought through. And the government needs to be big enough to admit they made a mistake and back down. Simple, clear, reasonable. Everything Starmer's response wasn't, because Starmer can't admit mistakes. That would require having a spine. That would require standing for something concrete enough to be wrong about. Instead, he just keeps restating the same talking points, like if he says them enough times. Reality will bend to match his spreadsheets. Spoiler alert, it won't. The farmers know what this policy means for them. They've done the math. They've talked to their accountants. They know that £3 million sounds like a lot until you factor in land prices, equipment, livestock and everything else that makes a farm actually function. And they know that when the tax bill comes, they'll have no choice but to sell. That's not speculation. That's basic arithmetic. But Starmer's still up there, insisting everything's fine, like a man trying to convince you the Titanic is unsinkable while water rushes past his ankles. Now let's talk about what this whole debacle really exposed, because it's not just about inheritance tax. It's about leadership, or rather the complete absence of it. Keir Starmer has been positioning himself as the sensible alternative, the grown-up in the room, the man who'll bring stability after years of conservative chaos. But what Clarkson's interventions revealed is that Starmer isn't stable, he's stagnant. There's a difference. Stability means having principles and sticking to them even when things get rough. Stagnation means being so afraid of making the wrong move that you don't make any move at all. And that's Starmer's entire political identity. He's the human equivalent of a loading screen that never quite finishes. You keep waiting for something to happen, for some kind of directional vision to emerge, but it never does. He just keeps buffering, stuck in an endless loop of carefully calculated nothingness. And the British public is getting tired of waiting. They don't want another politician who speaks in focus grouped platitudes. They want someone who actually believes in something, someone who can look at a problem and say, here's what we're going to do about it, without needing to check with 12 different committees first. Clarkson, for all his flaws, has that quality. When he speaks, you know exactly where he stands. You might disagree with him. You might think he's completely wrong, but at least you know what you're dealing with. With Starmer, it's like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Every time you think you've pinned down what he actually believes, he pivots just enough to keep you guessing. And that's not strategy. That's cavderdis dressed up as pragmatism. And the Labour Party used to stand for something. It used to represent working people, unions, communities that got left behind by the system. Now it's become this bland, corporatized version of itself, more concerned with not offending potential donors than actually fighting for the people who need fighting for. And Starmer embodies that transformation perfectly. He's a party leader who seems genuinely uncomfortable with the idea of leading. Like he'd rather be in a committee meeting discussing the best font for a policy document than actually out there making decisions that matter. And you can see it in how he handled the farmer protests. Instead of meeting them with empathy and genuine engagement, he met them with statistics. He pulled out his threshold figures like that would somehow make their fears disappear, as if telling someone drowning that statistically most people don't drown would be any comfort at all. Meanwhile, Clarkson did what Starmer should have done. He listened. He showed up. He acknowledged that these people had legitimate concerns and that maybe, just maybe, the government had gotten this one wrong. That's not complicated. That's basic human decency. But in modern British politics, apparently that counts as revolutionary. And the reason it landed so hard, the reason Clarkson's words has carried so much more weight than anything coming out of Westminster is because people are desperate for authenticity. They're tired of politicians who sound like they've been programmed by the same boring algorithm. They want someone who talks like a real person, who shows actual emotion, who isn't afraid to call something stupid when it's stupid. Clarkson gave them that. He didn't dress it up in parliamentary language. He didn't soften the blow with diplomatic phrasing. He just said what needed saying. The government messed up. They need to admit it and fix it. End of story. And that directness, that refusal to hide behind political theatre, made Starmer look like exactly what he is. A man more concerned with appearing reasonable than actually being effective. A politician so obsessed with not making waves that he's forgotten how to swim. And let's be brutally honest about what this means for Labour's future. If Keir Starmer can be politically outmanoeuvred by a television presenter who's best known for crashing cars and insulting caravans, what hope does he have against actual political opponents? The Conservatives are imploding, sure, but that doesn't automatically mean Labour wins by default. You actually have to offer people something to vote for, not just something to vote against. And right now, Starmer's pitch is essentially, I'm not as bad as the other guys. That's not inspiring. That's not a vision. That's the political equivalent of a restaurant advertising that their food probably won't give you food poisoning. Technically true, but not exactly making anyone rush through the doors. The tragedy is that this should be Labour's moment. The Tories have handed them every possible advantage. Boris Johnson's out. Rishi Sunak's approval ratings are lower than a limbo bar at a dwarf convention. The economy's struggling. Public services are crumbling. This should be the easiest political layup in history. And somehow Starmer's still managing to fumble it because he's so determined not to scare off Middle England that he's forgotten to give anyone a reason to actually support him. He's trying to win by being inoffensive, which is like trying to win a boxing match by not throwing any punches and hoping your opponent gets tired and gives up. Clarkson's takedown worked because it highlighted all of this in one beautifully brutal moment. It showed that the Emperor has no clothes, except in this case, the Emperor has a very nice suit, but absolutely nothing underneath it. No vision, no passion, no real conviction about anything except the importance of not being too convicted about anything. And you can't lead a country like that. You can't inspire people to believe in a better future when you're too afraid to describe what that future might actually look like. Starmer wants to be everyone's second choice, the safe option, the sensible vote, but nobody falls in love with safe. Nobody gets excited about sensible. People want leaders who make them feel something, even if that something is occasionally uncomfortable. They want someone who will fight for them, not someone who will carefully consider whether fighting might be slightly too aggressive. And maybe we should form a working group to explore alternative approaches to potential conflict resolution. By the time Starmer finishes his sentence, the moment's gone, the opportunity's passed, and everyone's moved on to someone who actually knows how to make a decision. And that's why Clarkson's intervention stung so badly, because it revealed that the man who wants to be Prime Minister can't even handle criticism from someone who isn't even trying to be political. If a few well-aimed comments from a farm-owning TV presenter can reduce your entire political message to rubble, what happens when actual political heavyweights come after you? But let's dig deeper into why this moment matters beyond just the immediate embarrassment. Because what Clarkson did wasn't just roast Starmer. He gave voice to something much bigger that's been brewing in Britain for years now. There's a massive disconnect between Westminster and the rest of the country. The politicians live in their bubble, convinced they understand what ordinary people want, while those ordinary people are out here screaming that nobody's listening. And the farmers' protest was a perfect example of that disconnect. These aren't radical activists. These aren't professional protesters with nothing better to do. These are people who work brutal hours in all weather, keeping the country fed, asking for nothing except to be left alone to do their jobs and pass their life's work onto their children. And the government's response was to hit them with a tax that could destroy everything they've built. It wasn't malicious. It was worse than malicious. It was incompetent. It was a policy dreamed up by people who've probably never set foot on a working farm, who think agriculture is something that happens in the background while they focus on the real issues in London. And that contempt, that casual dismissal of an entire way of life is exactly what's driving people away from establishment politics. Clarkson understands this because he actually lives it. He's not some Westminster insider parachuting in for a photo op. He owns a farm. He knows the reality of trying to make agriculture work in modern Britain. He knows about the regulations, the costs, the endless battles with bureaucracy. And when he speaks about these issues, it comes from genuine experience, not from a briefing document someone handed him 5 minutes before the interview. That authenticity is powerful. It cuts through all the political nonsense and connects with people in a way that Starmer's carefully focus group statements never could. And this is where we need to talk about the broader crisis in British politics, because Starmer isn't alone in his blandness. He's just the most obvious example of a system that's completely lost touch with reality. Both major parties have become so obsessed with not offending anyone that they've stopped standing for anything meaningful. They conduct polls to figure out what people want to hear, then say those things in the most vanilla way possible and wonder why nobody's inspired. Meanwhile, people like Clarkson, who aren't professional politicians, who don't need to worry about party whips or donor relationships, can just tell the truth. And that truth-telling is so rare, so refreshing, that it cuts through everything else. The farmers' protest wasn't just about inheritance tax. It was about respect. It was about a government that claims to value rural communities while implementing policies that destroy them. It was about being told that your concerns don't matter, that it matter, that the numbers say you're wrong about your own life, that you should just trust the experts in London who clearly know better than you do. And people are tired of it. They're tired of being patronised politicians who speak to them like they're children, who need everything explained in simple terms, while simultaneously implementing policies so complicated that nobody can understand them without hiring expensive accountants. Clarkson's message was the opposite. He spoke to people like adults. He acknowledged their fears were legitimate. He didn't try to gaslight them into believing everything was fine when they could see with their own eyes that it wasn't. And that basic respect, that fundamental recognition of people's intelligence and concerns, is something Starmer and his ilk have completely forgotten how to do. They're so trapped in their political bubble that they genuinely can't understand why people are upset. The spreadsheets say everything's fine. The projections show most farms won't be affected. Why are these people still complaining? Because real life isn't a spreadsheet. That's why. And this gets to the heart of why Clarkson's demolition of Starmer resonated so powerfully. It wasn't about policy details or political point scoring. It was about the fundamental question of who actually understands Britain in 2024. And the answer clearly isn't the man who spent his entire career in Westminster and the legal system carefully climbing the ladder by never saying anything too controversial. It's the bloke who drives tractors, films TV shows, and occasionally says things that make people uncomfortable, but at least has the courage to say something. That's where we are now. The professional politicians have become so professionalised that they've lost the ability to connect with normal people. They speak in code in carefully constructed phrases designed to mean everything and nothing simultaneously. They've been trained to never give a straight answer, to always leave themselves wiggle room, to never commit to a position they might have to defend later. And voters can smell that cowardice from a mile away. They know when someone's being genuine and when someone's reading from a script. Starmer's always reading from a script. Even when he's not literally reading notes, you can tell he's mentally checking off boxes. Did I mention the threshold? Check. Did I emphasise our support for farmers? Check. Did I avoid saying anything that could be used against me later? Check. It's political performance art, except it's not even good performance. It's like watching someone do a paint-by-numbers version of leadership. Clarkson, meanwhile, just exists. He doesn't perform. He doesn't calculate every word. He just responds like a human being having a conversation. And in the wasteland of modern British politics, that basic humanity stands out like a beacon. It shouldn't be revolutionary to have politicians who talk like normal people. It shouldn't be shocking when someone in the public eye expresses genuine emotion about something that matters. But that's where we are. The bar has dropped so low that simply being authentic counts as exceptional. And Starmer can't even clear that pathetically low bar because he's forgotten how to be authentic. He's spent so long crafting his public image, so many years learning to say nothing in the most eloquent way possible, that there might not be anything real left underneath. He's become the political equivalent of an AI chatbot capable of generating responses that sound plausible but lack any actual substance or conviction. You can ask him the same question 3 different ways and get 3 slightly different versions of the same non-answer. And people are exhausted by it. They're exhausted by politicians who treat every interaction like a legal deposition where the goal is to survive without committing to anything. They want someone who'll just say what they think and deal with the consequences. Right or wrong, at least you'd know where you stand. With Starmer, you never know where you stand because he's still trying to figure out which position polls best with key demographics.